In this video I'm going to talk about creating paragraph styles in InDesign. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that I have the palettes that I need. The paragraph style palette usually comes out with the character style palette. We'll talk about character styles later. We're just going to focus on paragraph styles. So if you don't have these palettes, you can go to Window, Styles, and you can get it there. So Window, Styles, Paragraph Styles. And you notice when we open it up in a new document, it's blank. But there's already a thing here called Basic Paragraph. So Basic Paragraph in the brackets here, if I double click that, and I can go into my basic character formats, you may recognize this. This is the InDesign default. So I could change this so that any basic paragraph had new defaults for this document. Instead, I'm going to make a set of custom styles, but we're going to have all the same options. So I wanted to open this window and just show what we have here initially. The other way that we can use basic paragraph is basically as an eraser. So this is the other reason that I leave this to the defaults. I've used InDesign long enough that I can definitely recognize the Minion Pro Regular 12 point. So leaving the basic paragraph here as a style eraser, I find to be pretty useful in my workflow. So I'm just going to hit cancel on that. So the piece of text that I've brought in here to use as an example is a recipe. So recipes are a great way to work on styles. So you can take recipes from different places and format them so that they look like they're all from the exact same cookbook, even though they're from 5 different websites. So let's look at the information we have here, because in graphic design we always need to be careful about our content and our purpose. So I'm going to look at the content. We've got a title. These lines look like the list of ingredients. These look like the directions, and then there's a line about the yield here that this makes 4. So I want to add some text first before I start styling. So I'm going to click up here and I'm going to make an ingredients heading. And then down here I'm going to add a directions. And I think I'm actually going to put the yield at the top. Because when I look at these things, I think it's nice to be able to see at a quick glance the ingredients and the yield right at the top, to think, do I have enough of this? If I buy this, am I never going to use the rest of the ingredients? That kind of thing. So I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to put it up here. I'm also going to put in a title here. So I'm going to end up using character styles on this in a later video. So we'll just run with what we've got here. Alright, so there are 2 ways to go about making paragraph styles. You can style something first and then kind of pick up that styling that you've done manually into a paragraph style, and then it will be programmed that way. Or you can do the styling in the paragraph style window. So I'm going to show you both. The first way I'm going to go about it is styling it manually first and then picking it up. It's almost kind of like an eyedropper, picking up that style even though you don't use the eyedropper tool. And then later I'll show you how to style it in the window itself. So this first way is a little bit more accessible, especially if you're new to this. So I'm going to start with this subtitle here. So the ingredients and directions are going to end up being the same. And I'm going to go with my Source Sans Pro, which is a great free Google font. I'm going to go with bold, and I'll make it all caps. This 2 capital T's button. And because I'm going to pretend that this is a print project, my type down here, sort of in the more copy areas, or the body text areas, is probably going to end up being about 10 points, which is a good type size for print. So I don't need to make this too much bigger as a subtitle. So I'm going to go up to 14 points. Now the other important thing about paragraph styles is to remember that a paragraph to InDesign is anything between 2 hits of the return key. And if you want to see that in action, you can hit Option Command I, and you'll see these hidden characters. I'm going to zoom in here a bit so you can see anywhere there's this little backward P, which is not a specific mark to InDesign. This is indicating a paragraph break or hitting the return key. So even to InDesign, if you had a line with one word, so directions and ingredients and none, they are paragraphs according to InDesign. So I'm going to press Option Command I to remove those. So the other thing I need to do, because this one word is a paragraph, is I need to think about the spacing. So because this subtitle goes with the things underneath it and not the things before, I need more space before it and less space after it so that it stays connected to the ingredients, because that's what it serves. So on my size screen, I have these options in the top toolbar. So these are my indents and spacing options here. So I've got the indents, and I think my screen is just not wide enough to show the spacing. So if you're on a bigger screen, you might have them very close to your indent options. So if you're on a screen like mine, you need to open your paragraph palette, and you can get that through Window, Type in Tables, Paragraph. So don't confuse the two. The paragraph palette is just settings as you would normally manually do them, and the paragraph styles is a style programming thing that's going to save you a ton of time as you format. So I'm just in the normal paragraph palette, and I'm going to insert a little bit of a space after, and I'll do twice as much of a space before. So I may need to come back and address this once I style the rest, because the space is really dependent on the type size and other things that are going on in the whole composition of the page. But for now, this sort of sets this up in a pretty basic spacing where I've got more before and less after, so this stays connected to the type after it. I'm going to click so I can actually see that a bit better. So I like where that is for now. So I'm going to place my cursor up there. I don't have to highlight it. I just need to have the cursor in there. And if I go back to my paragraph styles palette, I can see now that basic paragraph has a plus sign. So anytime you see a plus sign after a paragraph style name, it means that you have made manual changes over that program style. So to basic paragraph, it's anytime we make a change from the default InDesign font, we're going to get that plus sign. So that plus sign is really important, and we'll come back to that in later videos in this series. So I want to make a new style based on this type here where my cursor is. So I'm going to click the New button, little page flip. And this always pops up with paragraph style 1. So I'm going to double click on this, and this will open that window that looks exactly the same as the basic paragraph one I showed you before. I'm going to title it Subtitle. We'll talk about based on and next style in later videos. If I have a full keyboard, so not on a laptop unfortunately, and not on the condensed keyboard where it doesn't have the calculator style section by your right hand, but if I have a full keyboard that does have that on the right, I can apply a shortcut, which is even more of a time saver. So I'm going to add the shortcut Command 1. So I held either the command keys and the one that's by my right hand in the calculator section on my full keyboard. I'm going to go to basic character formats, and you'll be able to see that everything that I manually did before I made this new paragraph style is in here. So it picked up the font, the style, the size, it picked up the case as all caps. And I did not change the leading from the default. That's why the leading is in parentheses. Any number in parentheses like that means that it's automatically calculated. So I think that's fine for a subheading. I'm definitely going to be changing the leading with the other, the list and the directions, because it will definitely need more assistance. The other thing we're going to use a lot here is indents and spacing. So I already used this phrase, and you can see here that our space before and our space after have been picked up from what I did in the regular paragraph palette. So everything looks good. You notice nothing changes because we already did the styling. We're basically just coming in here, we're giving a name, and in this case a shortcut if you have a full keyboard, and we're just kind of saving this to use later. So speaking of later, now it's later, so I'm going to go down to directions, and I can either click on Subtitle, or I can press Command 1, and it automatically formats it. It formats the style of the typeface as well as the spacing. That's one of the main differences between paragraph and character styles. Character styles cannot have any spacing because they're really just exceptions to paragraph styles. They're like the bold vocab words in your textbook or things like that. So again, we'll discuss those later, but that's one of the key differences. So if you need anything with spacing, make sure you're always using paragraph styles. Alright, so that was nice and easy. So next I'm going to go to the ingredients list. And I'm going to style this through the paragraph style window. So I'm going to drag a quick selection like this. So I'm just holding my mouse button down while I'm in the type box. And I'm just basically going to hit every line. I don't have to make a whole complete selection and get all the hidden characters and everything. I just need to hit every paragraph. And in this case it's a list, so it's kind of like every line. So I hit every paragraph that I want to affect. Make a new paragraph style sheet right off the bat. And double click the new one that's paragraph style 1. So first I'm going to make sure that the preview box is checked, because that's going to preview the things that I'm choosing as I work. So I'm going to title this Ingredients List. I'm not going to give it a shortcut for now. I'm going to go to Basic Character Formats, and I'm going to use the same Source Sans Pro family. And you notice when I go to the next box, it applies that change. So again, I'm pretending this is print. So I'm going to go down to 10 points. And I'm going to increase the leading. Because this list, if you think about how you use a recipe, you're going to look at the list and say, okay, a quarter teaspoon of salt. Then you're going to turn away, go get your salt, come back. Okay, teaspoon of sugar, I need my sugar too. So you're going back and forth to this list. So I want to make it as readable as possible. I might even go one more point. Under Indents and Spacing, I'm going to use the left indent option. So this will increase the space on the left of the text, not just the first line. That's how we think of, one way you can do paragraphs is with a first line indent. This is the entire left side. So even though these are all technically first lines of paragraphs, this will move, even if one of these went to a second line, this will move it all over. So this kind of sort of packages it in its own little space as its own connected bit of information. So I'm happy with that. I don't think I need to do anything else for now. So I'm going to hit OK on that. And then when we click in here, once we're outside of the paragraph style window, we can see that all of those things that we did are now options on the type. Now, if you're editing this later and you kind of forget about your paragraph styles, if I, for instance, change the leading, I immediately get a plus sign here because I've done something that is manually overriding the styles, and you really want to avoid that. The whole point of the styles is that they're programmed and they're absolutely consistent. This is a huge help when you have multi-page documents. So the way to get rid of the plus sign, sometimes, although it seems like on my version of 2017, my pop-up labels seem to be a bit slow. A lot of times you'll get a pop-up label. I'm going to make a bigger change, this is obvious. You get a pop-up label with anything that's a plus sign that lists the overrides so you can see what they are. But if you right or control click on a paragraph style with a plus sign, you can see we have a redefine style option. So that would make the changes you made over the style apply to everything that has a style linked. I don't want to do that yet. I'll talk about it later. I could go in to edit it. But if I just choose apply, or if I just click on this again, it will remove those overrides. So you definitely, if something looks off, you want to go in and look and see if you have any plus signs. Alright, so now I'm going to go down to the directions. So again, I'm just going to kind of hit all the paragraphs. And I'm going to make a new style. So I'm going to style this through the paragraph style options window. I'm going to call this directions text. And I'm going to stick with that same type family. And leave it on regular. I'll also make this 10 points because that's usually a pretty good reading size in print. I'm going to increase the leading a little bit. Under Indents and Spacing, I'm going to add a space after on the paragraphs so that they actually look like paragraphs. Okay. So these lines are pretty long, especially if it's something you're going to be going back and forth to. So there are a couple ways that I could deal with that. I could do a right side indent. I could just make my text box narrower. For the sake of demonstration, since I've clicked OK on that, I'm going to show you how to edit a paragraph style and therefore everything it's linked to. So right now I have my black arrow, my selection tool. I'm just going to click outside so I don't have any text highlighted at all. If I open the directions text, and I'm going to move it over here for a second, go back to Indents and Spacing, and then I choose the right indent, and I have preview checked over here. And I start increasing that right indent, you can see that there's sort of a magical line pushing that text over. A little bit more, 2 inches. So this is a much more reasonable line length to read. It's a little bit long, but as far as the composition of the whole page and the length of this, which I now realize has some extra stuff in it, I think it looks better compositionally. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to hyphenation, and I'm going to uncheck this box. And you notice that it will never hyphenate anything anymore. So oftentimes if you do that, you may go back to address either the width of your text box, or I'm going to go back to Indents and Spacing and increase that right indent a little bit so I get a better rag over here. So the rag, because this is left aligned, we call this rag on the right side. So this looks a bit better. I'm going to hit OK. So you notice I didn't actually select any type, I just changed the programmed style, and everything it was linked to changed. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to fix these things here. So some of the ingredients got on the same line. This happened when I copied it and pasted it from the PDF that I had. So taking a look here, I see that we've got a widow. And let's say I printed this out and I felt like this text was a little bit big. It makes sense for the list because that's more of a back and forth thing. But this is read in a bigger chunk, and I say when I print it out with this typeface, it looks kind of big. So I'm going to go back to my selection tool and click off of that so I don't have any type selected. Be careful, if you have a box selected and you edit a paragraph style, you will get disaster, because as soon as you click on it, it applies that paragraph style to everything. So you can see all of my styles went away. So while I'm in here, I'm going to make the change that I want, and then I'll go back and edit that as an additional way to work on showing you how to apply styles. So let's say I accidentally did this, and let's pretend I didn't realize it. I can easily come back here to my subtitles, and I can hit Command 1. I can highlight my ingredients, click on the ingredients list, and my ingredients heading. I can then click on my subtitle one, and now we're back where we were. So I have another window here that I would address with some additional work on the paragraph, or the line length or paragraph width, and the type size. I would probably want to print this again if it's a print project to make sure it looks all right. So this would definitely need to be addressed, but it's not the topic that we're after right now. So up here at the top, I'm going to do some styling on the title. Here's another quick shortcut. If I hold the Shift key and click the up arrow, the type size grows in tens. So if you know you want a bigger style, but you're not quite sure what size, holding the Shift key is a great way to get there quick. So I have my spell check on, which creates these red lines. That's in the Edit menu under Spelling. So I've checked Dynamic Spelling. I'm going to leave it on because I often forget when I turn it off, and then I'll miss something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just switch to another tool that's not the type tool and hit the W key to go to preview mode and hide that red line. So I can definitely see that these A's are touching because of the way the font was designed. The kerning is a little bit tight on there, so I'm going to click in there and adjust the kerning. So the kerning is the spacing between any two characters, and only those two characters. If you're highlighting multiple characters, you're actually adjusting the tracking. So this is what tracking looks like. And then kerning is just between two characters. So another great keyboard shortcut is holding the Option key and using the left and right arrows to adjust your kerning. All right. So I've got this title, and I'm going to go ahead and pick that up into a style. So I have, if you remember here, I've got a tracking value of 25, so these letters are a little bit more spaced out than normal. And that's going to be picked up in my paragraph style. So I'm going to click New Style, double click on this paragraph style 1, and I'm going to type recipe title. Now you notice that because I had accidentally applied that directions text to everything, well, intentionally, accidentally, to recreate something that you might end up doing, I'm going to be really intentional about putting this on no paragraph style. So I don't want this based on the direction style, because then if I change the directions, like if I change the font, the title would change. So I think you could easily see that that might be useful in some cases, but I definitely want them disconnected in this case. And we'll talk about that later. Some basic character formats. I can see I got my tracking and everything else that I chose for that. So I'm just going to hit OK. And then we've got this line for yield. So I want this to be pretty similar to the directions text. That's what it's in, due to that intentional mistake that I made. And I like the way it looks. I'd want yield to be bold, and I'm also kind of curious how long this takes. So that kind of information would be up here, maybe like the skill level needed, like beginner, intermediate, expert. So because this recipe doesn't provide that information outright, I'm just going to sort of pretend that it's there. So I am going to want to make some change to this so that type looks a little bit different. In this case, I am going to leave the style linked. So right now it's on directions text. I'm going to make a new style, double click paragraph style 1 that just popped up. So I'm going to leave based on here, and I'm going to name this additional info, because as I said, if I have it a time or a skill level, I would also put that in this area in this style. I'm going to make this italic, and that's all I'm going to do to it. And I'm going to save that. So here is my almost complete recipe. Everything's nicely styled. The only thing I really have left to solve is this widow. I'm probably going to go ahead and do additional recipes before I do that, though, just so I make sure that it's a type style that works for everything. I may have longer recipes, and let's just say I really have to fit them on one page. I may have to change this right indent so I get things to fit on the page for all the recipes that I'm doing. Alright, so pretty happy with this. Let's say that I kind of put this away and came back, or you're working with someone else's file, and you decide that the directions text, after all, maybe you get the feedback that that should be a serif typeface, which are generally considered a bit better for reading longer paragraphs. So I'm going to make sure I have nothing selected and open my directions text again. Go to my basic character formats, and in here I'm going to use the source serif family. So this has been drawn specifically to go with the source Sans Pro, which is pretty great. So I'm going to click in the next box just to see that applied, and you notice that my additional info line also changed. That's because this style is based on this style. So if I make font changes, size changes, anything in these formats, it's going to be reflected because it's based on that other style. So that's the reason I might not want to use that option. If I go back up to additional info, I can change that to be based on no paragraph style. And change that back to Source Sans Pro Italic. Alright. So I noticed that changing the font also solved that widow, so that's a double bonus. So let's say I'm going to make this multiple pages. I'm going to show you real quick how to do that and then format your next one. So I'm just going to pretend that I've pasted a new recipe in this just to make the video shorter. I know you've got a handle on copy and paste, not worried about it. So the quick way to make sure that everything is in the exact same place on additional pages so that when you flip through in a book or in a PDF, it doesn't look like the type box starts, the corner of this text box is here in one, and then here in another, and here in another. Real quick way to do that, there's a couple. I can right or control click in the Pages palette on my first page and say Duplicate Spread. And that does exactly what it says. Now I have two identical pages. If you've already made, say, a 5-page document because you're going to do 5 recipes, so you've already got the pages, so you don't want to duplicate them. It is very easy to delete extra pages you don't need. The other way to do it, which is also a command that's very useful anywhere in InDesign, is I'm going to click on this and copy it, pressing Command C. If I go to the next page, so I'll double click, I can do Edit Paste in Place, which is Shift Option Command V if you have nimble fingers. So Edit Paste in Place does exactly what it says. It pastes it exactly in place on the page that you have selected. So I know, I'm going to double click back and forth between these two pages, that these are in the exact same spot. So it looks like there's a little bit of wiggle there, but that's display quirk in InDesign. All right, so I'm on page 2. I'm going to go back to my paragraph styles palette. I'm going to click basic paragraph just to pretend that I have pasted a new recipe. So this is where we started, and everything's going to be super easy. I can click in not in the title. I can make it recipe title. I'm going to hit the down arrow, and then I can click additional info, click the down arrow again, and click subtitle. Then I'm going to hit all these lines by clicking and dragging. Those would be ingredients list. Click in directions. I can hit Command 1, or I can click on Subtitle in my paragraph styles. So Command 1. I'm going to hit all these lines and click Directions Text. And now I've got my identically formatted recipes. So I'm well on my way to making nice, consistent design and consistent typography through the use of paragraph styles.